All right, welcome back everybody to another stream of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I hope you're all doing well and having a fantastic week so far, and that, getting more and more excited about Friday being a thing. So, last time we were here, we read more, and it was quite intense last time because we ended up having Mr. Rochester begging Jane to stay after she found out that he had a wife and he tried to marry her while also having a legal marriage to somebody else. And obviously, Jane was like, how could I marry you? You already have a wife. I'm not a mistress kind of person. And the thing is that Mr. Rochester told Jane that he had mistresses before because his wife is so crazy and isn't a person anymore in his mind. And Jane heard that and thought to herself, wow, so if I go along with him, he's eventually just going to tell me that he's bored with me and he's not going to want me anymore. So they have a whole falling out, really. And, Mr. Rochester's crying and everything. And Jane feels so sad and, upset because she does love Mr. Rochester for who he is. And now knowing that she could never truly be his wife, she's decided to leave. So she ended up leaving Thornfield Hall and she just traveled and she went as far as she could, and she ended up leaving her bag that had money in it, and it was some jewelry in a carriage she took. So then she was completely destitute, and she was just walking among the moors, and she found a town. In this town, she tried to see if she could get work or help or anything. And everybody and their mother basically looked at her like, she was some wicked creature, something evil. And she ends up starving quite a bit. And she was commenting in her writing that, she was not happy to talk about those moments because they were probably some of her most darkest moments. And then she eventually, is walking one night and she stumbles upon a house. And this is a house that belongs to a very religious individual. And they do end up taking pity on her and they take her in. And Jane is really sick at this time. And she's just grateful to not be in the rain anymore and to have had something to eat. So that's kind of where we are. And there's two women that are in this house and they have their more elderly servant with them, and there's a brother. So we're going to get to learn a little bit more about these folks, and that's just kind of where we are in the story as Jane works to rebuild her life and to, figure out what she's going to do after Mr. Rochester, her man that she thought was going to be a somebody and somebody that she was going to love and to have and to be with. And that didn't work out so well. So it was kind of like a lost dream in a way. But anyway, we shall see what happens with these wonderful people. Maybe they'll help Jane, maybe they won't. We'll just have to find out. So, we are on chapter 29. The recollection of about 3 days and nights succeeding this very dim in my mind, and I can recall some sensations felt in that interval, but few thoughts framed and no actions performed. I knew that I was in a small room and in a narrow bed. To that bed I seemed to have grown. I lay on it motionless as a stone, and if torn from me it would have been almost to kill me. I took no note of the lapse of time, of the change from morning to noon, from noon to evening. I observed when anyone entered or left the apartment. I could even tell who they were. I could understand what they said when they spoke and stood near me, but I could not answer. To open my lips or to move my limbs was equally impossible. Hannah, the servant, was my most frequent visitor. Her coming disturbed me. I had a feeling that she had wished me away, and that she did not understand me or my circumstances, that she was prejudiced against me. Diana and Mary appeared in the chamber once or twice a day. They would whisper sentences in the sort of at my bedside. It is a very well look on her. Yes, and she would certainly have been found dead at the door this morning if she had been left out all night, and I wonder what she has been gone through. Strange hardships, I imagined, and I imagined poor, emaciated, and pallid a wanderer. Well, she is not an uneducated person, and I think by her manner of speaking and her accent was quite pure, and the clothes that she took off, and though splashed in wet, were a little worn and fine. Ah, yes, and she does have a peculiar face. It's fleshless and haggard as it is. I rather like it, and when in good health and animated, I can fancy her physiognomy, and, well, it would be most agreeable. Never since their dialogues did I hear a syllable of regret at the hospitality that they had extended to me, or of the suspicion or aversion to myself, as I was comforted. Mr. St. John came but once. He looked at me and said my state of lethargy was a result of reaction from excessive and protracted fatigue. He pronounced it needless to send for a doctor. Nature, he was sure, would manage best, if left to herself. He said every nerve that had been strained in some way, and in the whole system, must be asleep of torpid for some time. There was no disease, and he imagined that my recovery would be rapid enough when it had commenced. These opinions he delivered in a few words and in a quiet, low voice, and added, after a moment's pause, in a tone of a man a little accustomed to expansive comment, "Rather an unusual physiognomy, certainly not indicative of vulgarity or degradation." "Oh, far worse," responded Diana. "To speak truth, St. John, my heart rather warms to the poor little soul. I wish we may be able to benefit her permanently." "Well, that is hardly likely," was the reply. "You will find that she is some young lady who has had a misunderstanding with her friends and has probably injudiciously left them. We may perhaps succeed in restoring her to them, and if she is not obstinate, but I trace lines of force in her face which makes me skeptical of her traceability." He stood considering me in some minutes, and then added, "She looks sensible, but not at all handsome." "Oh, but she is so ill, St. John." "Ill or well, she would always be plain. The grace and harmony of beauty are quite wanting in those features." And on the third day I was better. On the fourth I could speak, move, and rise in bed and turn. Hannah had brought me some gruel and dry toast, and I supposed that when the dinner hour was through, I had then eaten with that relish, and the food was good. It was void of feverish flavor which had hitherto poisoned what I had swallowed. When she left me, I felt comparatively strong and revived. Ere long satiety of repose and desire for action disturbed me. I wished to rise, but what could I put on? Only my damp and bemired apparel, in which that I had slept on the ground and fallen in the marsh. I felt ashamed to appear before my benefactor so clad. I was spared that humiliation. On a chair by my bedside were all my own things. They were clean and dry. My black silk frock hung against the wall. The traces of the bog were removed from it, the creases left by the wet smoothed out, and it was quite decent. My very shoes and stockings were purified and rendered presentable. There were means of washing in the room, and a comb and a brush to smooth my hair. And after a weary process and resting every 5 minutes, I succeeded in dressing myself. My clothes hung loose on me, for I was much wasted, but I covered the deficiencies with a shawl, and once more, clean and respectable looking, no speck of dirt, no trace of disorder that I so hated, and which seemed to degrade me, had left me. I crept down a stone staircase with the aid of the banisters, to a narrow, low passage, and found my way presently to the kitchen. It was full of fragrance of new bread and warmth of a generous fire. Hannah was baking. Prejudices, as is well known, are most difficult to eradicate from the heart of those whose soil has never been loosened or fertilized by education. They grow there, firm as weeds and strong as stones. Hannah had been cold and stiff, indeed, at first, and latterly she had begun to relent a little, and when she saw me come in a tidy and well-dressed, she even smiled. "Well, you have gotten up," she said. "You are better then. Now you may sit down in my chair on the hearthstone, if you will." And she pointed to the rocking chair. I took it. She bustled about and examined me every now and then, and with the corner of her eye turning to me, she took some loaves from the oven and bluntly asked, "Did you ever go a-begging afore you come here?" I was indignant for a moment, but remembering that anger was out of the question, and that I had indeed appeared to be a beggar to her, I answered quietly, but still not without a certain marked firmness. "You are mistaken in supposing me a beggar. I am no beggar, any more than yourself or the young ladies." After a pause she said, "I do not understand that. You've like you no home or no brass. That I guess." "The want of house or brass? By which you mean, I suppose, is money. It does not make a beggar in your sense of the word." "Are you book-learned?" she inquired presently. "Yes, very." "But you've never been to a boarding school." "Ah, but I was at a boarding school for 8 years. She opened her eyes wide. "Whatever can you not keep yourself for, then?" "I have kept myself, and I trust that I shall keep myself again. Now, what are you going to do with those gooseberries?" I had inquired as she brought out a basket of the fruit. "Well, I'm gonna make 'em into pies." "Give them to me, and I'll pick them." "Nay, I do not want you to do naught." "But I must do something. Please, let me have them." She consented, and she even brought me a clean towel to spread over my dress, lest, as she would say, that I would muck it up. "You've not been used to servants' work, I see by your hands," she remarked. "Happen you've been a dressmaker?" "No, you are wrong. And now never mind that what I have been. Don't trouble your head further about me. But tell me the name of the house that we are in." "Well, some call it Marsh End, and some call it Moor House." "And the gentleman who lives here, and he is called Mr. St. John." "Nay, he doesn't live here. He's only staying a while, and when he is at home, he is in his own parish at Morton." "That village a few miles off." "Aye." "And what is he?" "Well, he is a parson." I remembered the answer of the old housekeeper at the parsonage, and when I had asked to see the clergyman. "Then this was his father's residence?" "Aye. It's old Mr. Rivers who had lived here, and his father and grandfather and Gert and great-grandfather before him." "The name, then, of that gentleman is Mr. St. John Rivers?" "Aye. St. John is like his Kirkstone name." "And his sisters are called Diana and Mary Rivers?" "Yes." "And their father is dead?" "Dead 3 weeks since of a stroke." "And they have no mother either?" "Well, the mistress has been dead this about money a year." "Have you lived with this family long?" "I've lived here 30 year, and I've nursed them all 3. "That proves that you must have been an honest and faithful servant. I will say so much for you, though you have had the incivility to call me a beggar." She again regarded me with a surprised stare. "Well, I believe," she said, "I was quite mistaken in my thoughts of you. But there is so many cheats about, and you mun forgive me, please." "And though," I continued rather severely, "you wished to have me turn from the door on the night when you should not have shut out a dog." "Well, it was hard, but what can anybody do? I thought more o' the child or more of myself, and the poor things. They've like nobody to take 'em on and care for 'em but me. I'm to look sharpish." I maintained a grave silence for some minutes. "Oh, you mustn't think too hardly of me," she again remarked. "But I do think hardly of you," I said, "and I'll tell you why. Not so much because you refused to give me shelter or regarded me as an impostor, or as because you just now made it a species of reproach that I had no brass and no house. Some of the best people that I have ever lived have been destitute as I have, and if you are a Christian, you ought not to consider poverty a crime." "Oh, no more I ought," she said. "Mr. St. John tells me so, and I see I were wrong, and I've been clear a different notion on you now than what I had. You looked radiant right down into that little crater." "Well, that will do. I will forgive you now. Please, shake hands." She put her flowery and horny hand into mine. Another and a heartier smile illuminated her rough face, and from that moment we were friends. Hannah was evidently fond of talking, so while I picked the fruit, she made the paste for the pies, and she proceeded to give me sundry details about her deceased master and mistress, and the childer, as she referred to the young people as. Old Mr. Rivers, she said, was a plain man enough, but a gentleman, and of an ancient family as could be found. Marsh End had belonged to the Rivers ever since it was a house, and it was, as she affirmed, a boon to 100-year-old, for all it overlooked but a town. It was a humble place, and naught to compare with Mr. Oliver's grand hall down on Morton Vale. But she could remember that Bill Oliver's father was a journeyman and a needle-maker, and the Rivers were gentry in those days, and we cannot forget the Henrys, as on anybody a see, by looking into the registers of the Morton Church vestry. Still, she allowed, the old master was like other folk, and not much out of the common way, so he was a stark mad o' shooting and farming, and the such like. The mistress was different. She was a great reader and studied a deal, and the bairns had taken after her. There, everything, including the carpet and the curtains, looked at once well worn and saved. Wait, skipped a page, sorry. There was nothing like them in these parts, nor ever had been. They had been liked to learning, all three, almost from the time that they could speak, and they had always been of a make for their own, and Mr. St. John, when he grew up, could go to college and be a parson, and the girls, as soon as they left school, could seek places as governesses, for they had told her that their father had some years ago lost a great deal of money by a man that he trusted, and had gone bankrupt, and he was not as rich enough to give them any fortunes, and that they must provide for themselves. They had lived very little at home for a long while, and were only come now to stay a few weeks on the account of their father's death. But they did so like Marsh End and Morton, and all these moors and the hills about. They had been in London and many other grand towns, but they had always paid and said that there was no place like home, and that they were so agreeable with each other, and never fell out nor threeped, and she did not know that there was such a family for being such united. Having finished my task of gooseberry picking, I asked where the two ladies and their brother were now. They've gone over to Morton for a walk, but they should be back in about half an hour to tea. They returned within the time Hannah had allotted them, and they entered by the kitchen door. Mr. St. John, when he saw me, merely bowed and passed through. The two ladies stopped. Mary, in a few kind words, kindly and calmly, expressed the pleasure that she felt in seeing me well and being able to come down. Diana, on the other hand, took my hand and shook her head at me. "You look like you have waited for my leave to descend," she said. "You look very pale and so very thin. Poor child, poor child. My dear." Diana had a voice toned into my ear like the cooing of a dove. She possessed eyes whose gaze I delighted to encounter. Her whole face seemed to me full of charm, and Mary's countenance was equally intelligent, her features equally pretty, but her expression was more reserved, and her manners, though gentle, were more distant. Diana looked and spoke with a certain authority, and she had a will, evidently. It was my nature to feel pleasure in yielding to an authority supported like hers, and to bend where my conscience and self-respect permitted, to an active will. "And what business have you here?" she continued. "It is not your place. Mary and I sit in the kitchen sometimes, and because at home we like to be free, and even to license, but you are a visitor, and must go into the parlor." "I am very well here." "Oh, not at all. With Hannah bustling about and covering you with flour." "Besides, the fire is too hot for you," interposed Mary. "And to be sure," added her sister, "come, you must be obedient." And still holding my hand, she made me rise, and led me into an inner room. "Sit there," she said, placing me on the sofa, "while we take our things off and get tea ready. It is another privilege that we exercise in our little moorland home, to prepare our own meals when we are so inclined, when Hannah is baking, brewing, or washing, or ironing." She closed the door, and leaving me solus with Mr. St. John, who now sat opposite, a book or a newspaper in his hand, I examined first the parlor, and then its occupant. The parlor was rather a small room. It was very plainly furnished, yet comfortable, because clean and neat. The old-fashioned chairs were very bright, and the walnut wood table was like a looking-glass. A few strange and antique portals of these men and women of other days decorated the stained walls. A cupboard with glass doors contained some books and an ancient set of china. There was no superfluous ornament in the room, not one modern piece of furniture, save a brace of work-boxes and a lady's work-desk in rosewood, which stood on the side table, and everything, excluding the carpet and the curtains, looked at well once worn and well saved. Mr. St. John sitting still as one of the dusty pictures on the walls, keeping his eyes fixed on the page that he perused, and his lips mutely sealed, was easy enough to examine. Had he been a statue instead of a man, he could have not been easier. He was young, and perhaps from 28 to 30. He was tall, slender, his face riveted the eye, and it was like a Greek face, very pure in an outline, quite a straight classic nose, quite an Athenian mouth and chin. It is seldom indeed in an English face that comes so near the antique models as his did. He might as well be a little shocked at the irregularity of my lineaments. His own being was so harmonious. His eyes were large and blue, with brown lashes, and his high forehead it was colorless as ivory, and was partially streaked over by careless locks of fair hair. This is a gentle delineation, isn't it not, reader? Yet here he whom it describes scarcely impressed one with the idea of a gentle, yet yielding and impressible, or even a placid nature. Quiescent as he is now, there was something about his nostril, his mouth, his brow, which to my perceptions indicated that the elements within were either restless or hard or eager. He did not speak to me one word, not even direct to me one glance, until his sisters returned. Diana, as she passed in and out, and in course of preparing tea, brought me a little cake, and baked on the top of the oven. "Go on now, you eat that," she said. "You must be hungry, and Hannah says that you have had nothing but some gruel since breakfast." I did not refuse it, for my appetite was awakened, and it was keen. Mr. Rivers now closed his book and approached the table, and as he took a seat, he fixed his blue pictorial-looking eyes full on me. There was an unceremonious directness, a searching, a decided steadfastness in his gaze now, which told that intention, if not diffidence, had hitherto kept it averted from the stranger. "Are you very hungry?" he said. "I am, sir. It is my way, and it has always been my instinct ever to meet the brief with brevity, and the direct with plainness." "It is well for you that a low fever has forced you to abstain for the last 3 days. There would have been danger in yielding to the cravings of your appetite at first, and now you may eat, though still not immoderately." "I trust that I have not long to be at your expense, sir." And that was my very clumsily contrived and unpolished answer. "No," he said coolly. "When you have indicated to us the residence of your friends, we can write to them, and you may be restored to home." "Well, at that I must plainly tell you that that is out of my power to do, and being absolutely without home and friends." The three looked at me, but not distrustfully. I felt there was no suspicion in their glances, and there was more of a curiosity. I spoke particularly of the young ladies, and St. John's eyes, though clear enough in the literal sense and in a figurative one, was difficult to fathom. He seemed to use them rather as instruments to search other people's thoughts than as agents to reveal his own, the which combination of keenness and reserve was considerably more calculated to embarrass than to encourage. "Do you mean to say," he asked, "that you are completely isolated from every connection?" "I do, and not a tie links me to any living thing, not a claim do I possess to admittance under any roof in England." "Ah, what a most particular position at your age." And here I saw his glance directed towards my hands, which were folded on the table before me. I wondered what he thought there. His words soon explained the quest that he held. "You have never been married. Are you a spinster?" Diana laughed at that. "Why, she can't be above 17 or 18 years old, St. John," she said. "I am near 19, but I am not married, no." I felt a burning glow mount to my face, for bitter and agitating recollections were awakened by the allusion to marriage. They all saw the embarrassment and the emotion. Diana and Mary relieved me by turning their eyes elsewhere than to my crimsoned visage, but the colder and sterner brother continued to gaze, till the trouble that he had excited forced out tears as well as color. "Where did you last reside?" he asked now. "You are too inquisitive, St. John," murmured Mary in a low voice, but he leaned over the table and required an answer by a second firm and piercing look. "The name of the place where and of the person with whom I lived is my secret," I replied concisely. "Which, if you like, you have, in my opinion, a right to keep both from St. John and every other questioner," remarked Diana. "Yet if I know nothing about you or your history, I cannot help you," he said. "And you need help, do you not?" "I do need help, and I seek it as far, sir, as that some true philanthropist will put me in the way of getting work, in which I can do, and the remuneration for which will keep me but if in the barest necessities of life." "I know not whether that I am a true philanthropist, and yet I am willing to aid you to the utmost of my power, and in a purpose so honest. First, then, tell me, what have you been accustomed to do, and what can you do?" I had now swallowed my tea, and I was mightily refreshed by the beverage. As so much as so a giant with wine, it gave new tone to my unstrung nerves, and enabled me to address this penetrating young judge steadily. "Mr. Rivers," I said, turning to him and looking at him as he had looked at me, openly and without diffidence. You and your sisters have done me a great service, the greatest man can do his fellow being, and you have rescued me by your noble hospitality from death. This benefit confers that it gives you an unlimited claim on my gratitude and a claim to a certain extent on my confidence. I will tell you as much of the history of the wanderer that you have harbored as I can tell without compromising my own peace of mind, my own security, my moral and physical, and that of others. I am an orphan. I am the daughter of a clergyman, and my parents had died before I could know them. I was brought up in a dependent and educated in a charitable institution. I will even tell you the name of the establishment where I passed 6 years as a pupil, and then 2 as a teacher. It was the Lowood Orphanage System. It was the asylum. You will have heard of it, Mr. Rivers. The Reverend Robert Brocklehurst is the treasurer. Ah, yes, I have heard of Mr. Brocklehurst, and I have seen the school. Well, I left Lowood nearly a year since to become a private governess. I obtained a good situation and was happy, and this place I was obliged to leave 4 days before I came here. The reason of my departure I cannot and I ought not to explain. It would be useless, dangerous, and would sound incredible. No blame is attached to me, and I am as free from culpability as any one of you 3. Miserable as I am, and must be for a time, for the catastrophe which drove me from a house that I had found to be a paradise was of a strange and direful nature. I observed but 2 points in planning my departure: speed and secrecy. To secure these, I had to leave behind me everything that I possessed, except a small parcel, which, in my hurry and trouble of mind, I had forgot to take out of the coach that brought me to Whitecross. To this neighborhood, and then I came quite destitute. I slept 2 nights in the open air, and wandered about for 2 days without crossing a threshold. But twice in that space of time did I taste food, and it was when brought by a hunger and exhaustion and despair, almost to the last gasp, that you, Mr. Rivers, forbade me to perish of want at your door, and took me under the shelter of your roof. I know that all of your sisters have done for me since, and for I have not been insensible during my seeming torpor, and I owe to their spontaneous, genuine, and genial compassion as large a debt as to your evangelical charity. Oh, don't make her talk any more now, St. John, said Diana, as I had paused. She's evidently not fit for excitement. Come to the sofa and sit now, Miss Elliot. I gave an involuntarily half start at hearing the alias. I had almost forgotten my new name, and Mr. Rivers, whom nothing seemed to escape, noticed it at once. You said your name was Jane Elliot, he observed. I did say so, and it is the name by which that I think is expedient and to be called at present. But it is not my real name, and when I hear it, it sounds strange to me. Your real name, you will not give it? No. I fear discovery above all things, and whatever disclosure would lead to it, so that I would like to avoid. You are quite right, as I am sure, said Diana. Now, do, brother, let her be at peace at once. But when St. John had mused a few moments, he recommenced imperturbably, and with as much acumen as ever. You will not like to be long dependent on our hospitality, and if you wish, I see, to dispense as soon as may be with my sister's compassion, and above all with my charity, as I am quite sensible of the distinction drawn, nor do I resent it, it is just. You desire to be independent of us. I do, and I have already said so. Please show me how to work, or how to seek work, and that is all that I now ask. Please, and then let me go, and if be but to the meanest cottage, but till then allow me to stay here. I dread another essay of horrors, of homeless destitution. Indeed, you shall stay here, said Diana, putting her white hand on my head. Oh, you shall, repeated Mary, in the tone of such sincerity which seemed natural to her. My sisters, you see, you have a pleasure in keeping you, and keeping her, said St. John. And as they would have a pleasure in keeping and cherishing a half-frozen bird, and some wintry wind might have driven through their casement, I feel more inclination to put you in the way of keeping yourself, and shall endeavor to do so. But observe, my sphere is narrow. I am but an incumbent of a poor country parish. My aid must be of the humblest sort, and if you are inclined to despise the day of small things, seek some more efficient succor than I can offer. Oh, she said that she is already willing to do anything honest that she can do, answered Diana for me. And you know, St. John, she has no choice of helpers. She is forced to put up with such crusty people such as you. Well, I will be a plain dressmaker. I will be a plain workwoman. I will even be a servant and nurse girl, and if I can be no better, I answered. Right, said Mr. St. John quite coolly. And if such is your spirit, I promise to aid you, and in my own time and way. He now resumed the book at which he had been occupied before tea. Soon I withdrew, and for I had talked as much and sat up as long as my strength would permit. So now we are on chapter 30. The more I knew of the inmates of Moor House, the better I liked them. In a few days I had so far recovered my health that I could sit up all day and walk out sometimes. I could join with Diana and Mary in all their occupations, and converse with them as much as they had wished, and aid them in when and where they would allow me. There was a reviving pleasure in this intercourse. It was a kind that now tasted by me for the first time, the pleasure arising from perfect congeniality of tastes, sentiments, and principles. I liked to read what they liked to read, and what they enjoyed delighted me. What they approved I reverenced. What they loved in their sequestered home, I, too, in the gray, small, antique structure with its low roof and its latticed casements, its mouldering walls, its avenue of aged firs, all grown aslant under the stress of a mountain of winds, its garden dark with yew and holly, and where no flowers but of the hardiest species could bloom, I found a charm both potent and permanent. They clung to the purple moors behind and around their dwelling, to the hollow vale to which the pebbly bride path leading from their gate descended, and to which wound between fern banks first, and then amongst the few of the wildest little pasture fields that ever bordered a wilderness of heath, or gave sustenance to a flock of gray moorland sheep, and with their little mossy-faced lambs, they clung to this scene, and I say with a perfect enthusiasm of attachment. I could comprehend the feeling and share both its strength and truth. I saw the fascination of the locality. I felt the consecration of its loneliness. My eye feasted on the outline of swell and sweep, and on the wild coloring communicated to ridge and dell by moss, and by heath bell, and by flower-sprinkled turf, and by brilliant bracken and mellow granite crag. These details were just to me what they had been to them, so many pure and sweet sources of pleasure, the strong blast and the soft breeze, the rough and the halcyon day, the hours of sunrise and sunset, the moonlight and the clouded night. Oh, it developed in me in these regions the same attraction for them, wound round my faculties, and came spell that entranced theirs. Indoors we agreed equally well, and they were both more accomplished and better read than I was. But with eagerness I followed the path of knowledge that they had trodden for me. I devoured the books that they lent me. Then it was full satisfaction to discuss with them in the evening what I had perused during the day. Thought fitted and thought. Opinion meant opinion. We coincided, and in short, perfectly. If in our trio there was a superior and a leader, it was Diana. Physically, she far excelled me. She was handsome, she was vigorous, and in her animal spirits there was an affluence of life and certainty of flow, such as excited by my wonder, and while it baffled my comprehension. I could talk a while when the evening commenced, but the first gush of vivacity and influency gone, I was fain to sit on a stool at Diana's feet, to rest my head on her knee, and listen alternately to her and Mary, while they sounded thoroughly on the topic on which the eye had but touched. Diana offered to teach me German, and I liked to learn of her, and I saw the part of the instructress pleased, and that suited her. That of the scholar pleased, and it suited me no less. Our natures dovetailed. It was mutual affection of the strongest kind. They discovered that I could draw, and their pencils and color boxes were immediately at my service. My skill was greater in this one point than theirs, and it surprised and charmed them. Oh, Mary would sit, and she would watch me by the hour together, and then she would take lessons, and such a docile, intelligent, and assiduous pupil she made. Thus occupied and mutually entertained, the days passed like hours, and weeks passed like days. As to Mr. St. John, the intimacy which had arisen so naturally and rapidly between me and his sisters did not extend to him. One reason of the distance yet observed between us was that he was comparatively seldom at home. A large portion of his time appeared devoted to visiting the sick and the poor among the scattered population of his parish. No weather seemed to hinder him in these pastoral excursions. Rain or fair, he would, when his hours of morning study were over, take his hat, and followed by his father's old pointer Carlo, go out into his mission of love or duty. I scarcely know in which light that he regarded that. Sometimes, when the day was very unfavorable, his sisters would expostulate. He would then say with a peculiar smile, more seldom than cheerful, "And as I let a gust of wind or a sprinkling of rain turn me aside from these easy tasks, what preparation would such sloth be for the future that I propose to myself?" Diana and Mary's general answer to this question was a sigh and some minutes of apparently mournful meditation. But besides his frequent absences, there was another barrier of friendship with him. He seemed of a reserved and abstracted and even a brooding nature. Zealous in his ministerial labors and blameless in his life and habits, he yet did not appear to enjoy that mental serenity, that inward content in which should be the reward of every sincere Christian and practical philanthropist. Often, of an evening, when he had sat at the window, his desk and papers before him, he would cease reading or writing, and rest his chin on his hand, and deliver himself up to what I do not know for that course of thought, but it was a perturbed and exciting, and it might have been in the frequent flash and changeful dilation of his eye. I think, moreover, that nature was not to him the treasury of delight that it was to his sisters. He expressed once, but only once in my hearing, with a strong sense of rugged charm of the hills and the iron-bound affection for the dark roof and the hoary walls that he called his home, but there was more of gloom than pleasure in the tone and the words in which the sentiment was manifested, and it never did seem that he would roam the moors for the sake of their soothing silence, never seek out or dwell upon the thousand peaceful delights that they could yield. Incommunicative as he was, some time elapsed before I had the opportunity of gauging his mind. I first got an idea of its caliber when I heard him preach in his own church at Morton. I wish I could describe that sermon, but it is past my power. I cannot even render faithfully the effect that it produced on me. I do recall that it began calm, and indeed it was far as delivery and pitch of voice went, it was calm to the end, an earnestly felt yet strictly restrained zeal that breathed soon in the distinct accents and prompted the nervous language. This grew to force, it was compressed, condensed, and controlled. The heart was thrilled and the mind astonished by the power of that preacher. Neither was it softened. Throughout there was a strange bitterness and an absence of consolatory gentleness. It was stern allusions to Calvinistic doctrines, election and predestination and reprobation. It was frequent, and each reference to these points sounded like a sentence pronounced for doom. And when he had done, instead of feeling better, calmer, more enlightened by his discourse, I experienced an inexpressible sadness, for it seemed to me, and I know not whether equally to others, that the eloquence to which I had been listening had sprung from a depth where lay turbid dredges of disappointment, where moved troubling impulses of insatiate yearnings and disquieting aspirations. I was so sure that St. John Rivers, a pure, lived, and conscientious and as zealous as he was, had not yet found that peace of God which passeth all understanding. He had no more found it, and I thought than I had with my concealed and raking regrets for my broken idol and lost Elysium, regrets to which I have latterly avoided referring to, but which possessed me and tyrannized me over ruthlessly. Meantime, a month had gone. Diana and Mary were soon to leave Moor House and return to the far different life and scene which awaited them, and they were to act as governesses in a large, fashionable south of England city, where each would hold station in families by whose wealthy and haughty members they were regarded only as humble dependents, and who neither knew nor sought out their innate excellences, and appreciated only their acquired accomplishments as they appreciated the skill of their cook or the taste of their waiting women. Mr. St. John had said nothing to me yet about the employment that he had promised to obtain for me, yet it became urgent that I should have a vocation of some kind. One morning, being left alone with him a few minutes in the parlor, I ventured to approach the window recess, which was his table, chair, and desk. It was consecrated as a kind of study, and I was going to speak, though not very well knowing in what words to frame my inquiry, for it was at all times difficult to break the ice of reserve that was always glassing over such natures as his, when he saved me the trouble by first being the one to commence a dialogue. Looking up, I drew near. "You have a question to ask me?" he said. "Yes, I wish to know whether you have heard of any service that I can offer myself to or to undertake." "Yes, I found and devised something for you 3 weeks ago. But as you seemed both useful and happy here, as my sisters had evidently become attached to you, and your society gave them unusual pleasure, I deemed it inexpedient to break in on your mutual comfort until their approaching departure from Marsh End, and should render yours necessary." "And they will go in 3 days now," I said. "Yes, and they will go, and I shall return to the parsonage at Morton. Hannah will accompany me, and this old house will be shut up." I waited a few moments in expecting that he would go on with the subject that had been first broached, but he seemed to have entered another train of reflection. His look denoted an abstraction from me and my business. I was obliged to recall him to a theme which was of necessity and one of close and anxious interest to me. "What is the employment in which you have in view, Mr. Rivers? I hope this will not delay and will not have increased the difficulty of securing it." "Oh, no, since it is an employment which depends only on me to give, and you to accept." He again paused, and there seemed to be a reluctance to continue. I grew impatient. It was a restless movement or two, and an eager and exacting glance fastened on his face. It conveyed the feeling to him as effectually as words could have done, and with less trouble. "You need to be in no hurry to hear," he said. "Let me frankly tell you, then. I have nothing eligible or profitable to suggest. Before I explain, recall, if you please, my notice. It had been clearly given, and that if I helped you, it must be as a blind man would help the lame. I am poor, and for that I have paid my father's debts, and all the patrimony remaining to me will be thus this crumbling grange, and the row of scathed firs behind, and the patch of moorish soil, with its yew trees and the holly bushes in front. I am obscure. Rivers is an old name, and but of the 3 sole descendants of the race. 2 earn the dependent's crust amongst strangers, and the 3rd considers himself an alien from his native country, not only for life but in death. Yes, and deems, and is no bound to deem, himself honored by the lot, and aspires but after the day when the cross of separation from fleshly ties shall be laid on his shoulders, and when the head of the church militant, of whose humblest members he is one, shall give me that word, and say, 'Rise, follow me.'" St. John said these words as he pronounced his sermons, with a quiet and deep voice, and with an unflushed cheek and a coruscating radiance of glance. He resumed, "And since I am myself poor and obscure, I can offer but a service of poverty and obscurity. You may even think it degrading, for I see now that your habits have been that of the world calls refined. Your tastes lean to the ideal, and your society has at least been amongst the educated. But I consider that no service degrades which can be bettering to our race. I hold that the more arid and unreclaimed the soil where the Christian laborer's task of tillage is appointed to him, the scantier the meed his toil brings, the higher the honor. His, under such circumstances, is the destiny of the pioneer, and the first pioneers of the gospel were the apostles. Their captain was Jesus, the Redeemer himself." "Well," I said as he again paused, "please proceed." He looked at me before he proceeded, and indeed he seemed leisurely to read my face, as if its features and lines were characters on a page, the conclusions drawn from this scrutiny that he partially expressed in his succeeding observations. "I believe that you will accept the post that I offer you," said he, "and hold it for a while, not permanently, though, any more than I could permanently keep the narrow and the narrowing, the tranquil hidden office of an English country incumbent, for in your nature it is an alloy to detrimental a repose as that in mine, though it is of a different kind." "Please do explain," I urged when he halted once more. "I will, and you shall hear how poor the proposal is, how trivial and how cramping. I shall not stay long at Morton, now that my father is dead, and that I am now my own master. I shall leave this place probably in the course of 12 months, but while I do stay, I will exert myself to the utmost for its improvement. Morton, when I came to it 2 years ago, had no school. The children of the poor were excluded from every hope of progress. I established one for boys, and now I mean to open a second school for girls. I've hired a building for the purpose, with a cottage of 2 rooms attached to it, for the mistress's house. Her salary will be £30 a year, and her house is already furnished, very simply but sufficiently, and by the kindness of a lady named Miss Oliver, and the only daughter of the sole rich man in my parish, Mr. Oliver. He's the proprietor of a needle factory and an iron foundry in the valley. The same lady pays for the education and clothing of an orphan from the workhouse, and on the condition that she shall aid the mistress in such menial offices connected with her own house and the school as her occupation of teaching will prevent her from having time to discharge in person. Will you be this mistress?" He put the question rather hurriedly, and he seemed half to expect an indignant or at least disdainful rejection of this offer. Not knowing that all my thoughts and feelings, though guessing some, he could not tell in which light the lot would appear to me. In truth, it was humble, but then it was sheltered, and I wanted a safe asylum. It was plodding, but then, compared to that of a governess in a rich house, it was independent, and the fear of servitude with strangers entered my soul like iron. It was not ignoble, not unworthy, and not mentally degrading. I made my decision. "I thank you for your proposal, Mr. Rivers, and I accept it with all my heart." "But do you comprehend me?" he said. "It is a village school, and your scholars will only be poor girls. They'll be cottagers' children, and at the best, farmers' daughters. It'll be knitting, sewing, reading, writing, ciphering. Will be all you will have to teach. What will you do with your accomplishments? What with the largest portion of your mind, the sentiments, and the tastes? Save them until they are wanted. They will keep." "You know what you undertake, then?" "I do." He now smiled, and not a bitter one or one of sadness, but one well pleased and deeply gratified. "And when will you commence the exercise of your function?" "I will go to my house tomorrow and open the school. It would be ideal." "Ah, so it will be." He rose and then walked through the room, and standing still he again looked at me. He shook his head. "What do you disapprove of, Mr. Rivers?" I asked. "You will not stay at Morton long. No, no, no." "Why, what is your reason for saying so?" "I read it in your eye. It is not for that description which promises the maintenance of even a tenor in life." "I am not ambitious." He stared and started at the word ambitious. He repeated, "No. What makes you think of ambition? Who is ambitious? I know that I am. But how did you find it out?" "I was speaking of myself." "Well, if you are not ambitious, you are." He paused. "What?" "I was going to say impassioned, but perhaps you would have misunderstood the word, and so have been displeased. I mean that human affections and sympathies have a most powerful hold on you. I am sure that you cannot long be content to pass your leisure in such solitude, and to devote your working hours to a monotonous labor that is wholly void of stimulus, any more than I can be content," he added, and then with emphasis, "to live here, buried in morass, spent with the mountains. Oh, my nature that God gave me, contravened, my faculties, heaven bestowed, paralyzed and made useless. You hear now how I contradict myself, I who preached contentment with a humble lot and the water of God's service. I, his ordained minister, almost rave in my restlessness. Well, propensities and the principles must be reconciled by some means." He left the room, and in this brief hour I had learned more of him than in the whole previous month. Yet he still puzzled me. Diana and Mary Rivers had become more sad and silent as the day approached for leaving their brother and their home. They both tried to appear as usual, but the sorrow that they had to struggle against was one that could not be entirely conquered or concealed. Diana intimated that this would be a different parting from any that they had ever known, and it would probably be as far from St. John, and as he was concerned, it would be parting for years. It might be a parting for life. "Oh, he will sacrifice all to his long-framed resolves," she said. "Natural affection and feelings are more potent still, and St. John looks quiet, Jane, but he hides a fever in his vitals. You would think him gentle, yet in these things he is inexorable as death. And the worst of it is, oh, my conscience will hardly permit me to dissuade him from his severe decision. Certainly I cannot for a moment blame him for it. It is right, noble, and Christian, yet it breaks my heart." And the tears gushed to her fine eyes, and then Mary bent her head low over her work. "We are now without father, and we shall soon be without home and brother," she murmured. And at this moment a little accident supervened, which seemed decreed by a fate purposely to prove this truth of adage, that misfortunes never come singly, and to add to their distresses the vexing one of a slip between the cup and the lip. St. John passed the window, reading a letter, and he entered. "Our Uncle John is dead," he said. Both the sisters seemed struck, not shocked or appalled. The tidings appeared in their eyes rather momentous rather than afflicting. "Dead?" repeated Diana. "Yes." She riveted a searching gaze on her brother's face. "And what then?" she demanded in a low voice. "What then? Die?" he replied, maintaining a marble of immobility of feature. "What then? Why, nothing. Go on reading." He then threw the letter into her lap, and she glanced over it and handed it to Mary. Mary perused it in silence, and then returned it to her brother. All three looked at each other, and all three smiled. It was a dreary, pensive smile enough. "Amen, we can yet live," said Diana at last. "Oh, at any rate it makes us no worse off than we were before," remarked Mary. "Only the forces rather strongly on the mind and the picture of what might have been," said Mr. Rivers, "and a contrast somewhat too vividly with what is." He folded the letter and locked it in his desk, and then again went out. For some minutes no one spoke. Diana then turned to me. "Jane, will you wonder at us and our mysteries?" she said, "and think us as hard-hearted beings not to be moved at the death of so near a relation as an uncle? But we have never seen him or known him, and he was my mother's brother. But my father and he quarreled long ago, and it was by his advice that my father risked most of his property and in the speculation that ruined him. Mutual recrimination passed between them. They were parted in anger and never were reconciled. My uncle engaged afterwards of a more prosperous undertaking, and it appears that he realized a fortune of 20,000 pounds. He has never married and has no near kindred but ourselves and one other person, not more closely related than we. My father always cherished the idea that he would atone for his error by leaving his possessions to us, and that the letter informs us that he has bequeathed every penny to another relation, and with the exception of 30 guineas, to be divided between St. John, Diana, and Mary Rivers, and for the purchase of 3 mourning rings. And he has a right, of course, to do as he pleases, yet a momentary damp is cast on the spirits by the receipt of such news. Mary and I would have esteemed ourselves rich with 1,000 pounds each, and to St. John such a sum would have been valuable, for the good in it would have enabled him to do. This explanation given, and the subject was dropped. No further reference made to it by either Mr. Rivers or his sisters, and the next day I left Marsh End for Morton. The day after, Diana and Mary quitted it for a distant B. And in a week Mr. Rivers and Hannah repaired to the parsonage, and to the old grange it was abandoned. Chapter 39. My home, then, when I at last had found a home, it is a cottage in a little room with a whitewashed wall and a sanded floor. It was containing 4 painted chairs and a table, a clock, and a cupboard. and with 2 or 3 plates and dishes and a set of tea things in a shelf. Above a chamber of the same dimensions as the kitchen, and with a deal bedstand, and the chest of drawers, small yet too large to be filled with my scanty wardrobe, though the kindness of my gentle and generous friends has increased that, and by a modest stock of such things as are necessary. It is evening, and I have dismissed with the fee of an orange and the little orphan who serves me as handmaid. I'm sitting alone on the hearth. This morning the village school has opened. I had 20 scholars, but 3 of the number can read, and none can write or cipher. Several knit, and few sew a little, and they speak with the broadest accent of the district. At present they and I have difficulty in understanding each other's language. Some of them are unmannered, rough, intractable, and as well as ignorant, but others are docile and have a wish to learn and evince a disposition that pleases me. I must not forget that these coarsely clad little peasants are of flesh and blood as good as the scions of the gentlest genealogy, and that the germs of the native excellence and refinement of intelligence and kind feeling are as likely to exist in their hearts and as those as the best born. My duty would be to develop these germs. Surely I shall find some happiness in discharging that office. Much enjoyment I do not expect in the life opening before me, yet it will, doubtless, if I regulate my mind and exert my powers as I ought to, yield me enough to live on from day to day. I was very gleeful, settled, and contented during the hours that I passed in yonder bare, humble schoolroom, and this morning and the afternoon. Not to deceive myself, I must reply, no, I felt desolate to a degree. I felt, yes, an idiot that I am, I felt degraded. I doubted that I had taken a step in which sank, and, instead of raising me in a scale of social existence, I was weakly dismayed at the ignorance and the poverty and the coarseness of all that I heard and saw around me. But let me not hate and despise myself too much for these feelings. I know them to be wrong, and that is the great step that has to be gained. I shall strive to overcome them, and tomorrow I trust I shall get the better of them partially, and in a few weeks perhaps they will be quite subdued, and in a few months it is possible that the happiness of seeing progress and a change for the better in my scholars may substitute a form of gratification for disgust. Meantime, let me ask myself one question. Which is better, to have surrendered to temptation and listened to passion, and made no painful effort, no struggle, but to have sunk down in the silken snare and fallen asleep on the flowers covering it, and then wakened in a southern clime amongst the luxuries of a pleasure villa, to have now been living in France and Mr. Rochester's mistress, delirious with his love half of my time, and for he would, oh yes, he would have loved me well for a while, and he did love me, and no one would ever love me again so. I shall never know the sweet homage given to beauty, youth, and grace, for never to anyone else shall I seem to possess these charms. He was fond and proud of me. It is what no man besides will ever be. But where am I wandering? And what am I saying? And above all, feeling? Whether it is better, I ask, to be a slave in a fool's paradise at Marseilles, or be fevered with delusive and bliss in one hour, suffocating with the bitterest tears of remorse and shame the next, or to be a village schoolmistress, free and honest, and in a breezy mountain nook in the healthy heart of England. Yes, I feel now that I was right when I adhered to principle and law, and scorned and crushed the insane promptings of a frenzied moment. God directed me to a correct choice. I thank his providence for the guidance. Having brought my eventide musings to this point, I rose and I went to my door, and looked at the sunset of the harvest day, and at the quiet fields before my cottage, which with the school was a distant 1/2 mile from the village. The birds were singing their last strains. The air was mild and the dew was a balm. And while I looked, I thought myself happy and was surprised to find myself ere long weeping. And why? For the doom of which that had reft me from the adhesion to my master. For him I was no more to see, and for the desperate grief and fatal fury consequences of my departure, which might now perhaps be dragging him from the path of right, and too far to leave the hope of the ultimate restoration thither. At this thought I turned my face aside from the lovely sky of Eve and the lonely vale of Morton. And I say lonely, for in that bend of that it is visible to me, there was no building apparent save the church and the parsonage, and the half hid in the trees, and quite at that extremity, the roof of Vale Hall, where the rich Mr. Oliver and his daughter lived. I hid my eyes, and I leaned my head against the stone frame of my door. But soon a slight noise near the wicket expounded from my tiny garden, and from the meadow beyond it made me look up. It was a dog. It was old Carlo. It was Mr. Rivers' pointer, and as I saw in a moment, was pushing the gate in with his nose, and St. John himself leant upon it with folded arms, and his brow knit, and his gaze was grave almost to displeasure, fixed on me. I asked him to come in. "No, I cannot stay. I have only brought you a little parcel that my sisters left for you to have. I think it contains a color box and pencils and paper." I approached to take it, and it was a welcome gift. He examined my face, and I thought with austerity that, as I came near, the traces of tears were doubtless and very visible upon it. "Have you found your first day's work harder than you expected?" he asked. "Oh, no, on the contrary. I think in time I shall get on with my scholars quite well." But perhaps your accommodations, your cottage, your furniture, have disappointed your expectations. They are, in truth, scanty enough, but—" And then I interrupted. "My cottage is clean, and it is weatherproof, and my furniture is sufficient and commodious. All I see has made me thankful and not despondent. I am not absolutely such a fool and a sensualist as to regret the absence of a carpet or a sofa and a silver plate. Besides, 5 weeks ago I had nothing. I was an outcast, a beggar, a vagrant, and now I have an acquaintance, and I have a home, a business, and I wonder at the goodness of God, the generosity of my friends, and the bounty of my lot. I do not repine." "But do you feel solitude at such an oppression? The little house there behind you, and it's dark and it is empty." "I have had hardly time yet to enjoy a sense of tranquillity, much less to grow impatient under one of such loneliness." "Ah, very well, then I hope you feel the content that you express. At any rate, your good sense will tell you that it is too soon yet to yield to a vacillating fear of a lot's life. And what you have left before I saw you, I of course do not know, but I counsel you to resist firmly every temptation which would incline you to look back. Pursue your present career steadily, and for some months at least, please." "That is exactly what I mean to do," I answered St. John, and then he continued. "It is hard work to control the workings of inclination and to turn the bent to nature, but that it may be done, I know from experience. God has given us, and in a measure, the power to make our own fate, and when our energies seem to demand a sustenance that they cannot get, well, when our will strains after a path we may not follow, we need neither starve from inanition nor stand still in despair. We have but to seek another nourishment, and for the mind, as strong as the forbidden fruit, it has longed to taste. And perhaps it will be purer, and to hew out for the adventurous foot a road as direct and broad as the one fortune has blocked up against us, if rougher than it is. A year ago myself, I was also intensely miserable, and that is because I thought that I had made the mistake of entering the ministry. Its uniform duties had wearied me to death, and so I burnt for more of an active life of the world, and for a more exciting toil of a literary career, and for the destiny of an artist, author, orator, anything rather than that of a priest. Yes, the heart of a politician, of a soldier, of a votary, of a glory, of a lover, of a renown, of a lustre after power. It beat under my curate's surplice. And I considered, my life was so wretched, it must be changed or I must die. After a season of darkness and struggling, light broke and relief fell on my cramped existence. All at once it spread out into a plain without bounds. My powers heard a call from heaven to rise, and gather their full strength, and spread their wings, and mount beyond the ken. Ooh, God had an errand for me, and to bear with which afar, to deliver it well, and skill and strength, courage and eloquence, the best qualifications of soldier, statesman, and orator. That was all that was needed, and for all the center in the good missionary. Yes, it is a missionary that I have resolved to be, and from that moment my state of mind has changed. The fetters had dissolved and dropped from every faculty, and leaving nothing of bondage but its galling soreness, which time can only heal. My father, indeed, imposed the determination, but since his death I have not a legitimate obstacle to contend with. Some affairs have been settled, a successor for Morton provided, and an entanglement or two of the feelings broken through or cut asunder. A last conflict with a human weakness, in which I know I shall overcome, because I have vowed it so, and that I will overcome it, and I leave Europe for the East. He said this in his peculiar, subdued, and yet strangely emphatic voice, and looking, when he had ceased speaking, not at me, but at the setting sun, at which I looked at too. Both he and I had our backs towards the path leading up to the field to the wicket. We had heard no step on that grass, and had grown no track. The water was running in the vale, and was the lulling sound of the hour and the scene. We might well then start, and then a gay voice, it was sweet as a silver bell, exclaimed, "Good evening, Mr. Rivers, and good evening, old Carlo. Oh, your dog is quicker to recognize his friends than you are, sir, and he pricked his ears and wagged his tail when I was at the bottom of the fields, and now you have your back towards me." It was true, though Mr. Rivers had started at the first of those musical accents, as if a thunderbolt had split a cloud over his head, and he stood yet, and at the close of the sentence, in the same attitude in which the speaker had surprised him, his arm resting on the gate, and his face directed towards the west, he turned at last with a measured deliberation. A vision, as it seemed to me, had risen at his side. There appeared within 3 feet of him a form clad in pure white, a youthful and graceful form, full yet fine in contour, and when after bending to caress Carlo, it lifted up its head and threw back a long veil, and there bloomed under his glance a face of perfect beauty. Perfect beauty is a strong expression, but I do not retrace or qualify it. And as sweet features as ever temperate clime of Albion molded, as pure hues of rose and lily ever her humid gales and her vapory skies generated, and screened and justified, and in that instance the term. No charm was wanting, and no defect was perceptible. The young girl had regular and delicate lineaments, eyes shaped and colored as we see them in a lovely picture. Oh, it was long and dark and full, and the long and shadowy eyelash which encircles a fine eye with so soft a fascination, the penciled brow which gives such clearness, the white smooth forehead which adds such repose to the livelier beauties of tint and ray, the cheek oval, fresh and smooth, the lips fresh too, ruddy and healthy and sweetly formed, in the even and gleaming teeth without flaw, the small dimpled chin, the ornament of rich, plenteous tresses, all advantages, in short, which combined realized the ideal of beauty, were fully hers. I wondered as I looked at this fair creature. I admired her with my whole heart, and nature had surely formed her in a partial mood, and forgetting her usual stinted stepmother dole of gifts, had endowed this, her darling, with the grand dame's beauty. What did St. John Rivers think of this earthly angel? I naturally asked myself that question, and as I saw him turn to her and look at her, and as naturally as I sought the answer to the inquiry in his countenance, he had already withdrawn his eye from the Peri, and was looking at a humble tuft of daisies which grew by the wicket. "Ah, it is a lovely evening, but late for you to be out alone," he said as he crushed the snowy heads of the closed flowers with his foot. "Oh, I only came here from—" She mentioned the name of a large town some 20 miles distant. "This afternoon, and Papa told me that you had opened your school and that the new mistress has come, and I so wish to put my bonnet on after tea, and, well, I ran up the valley to see her. Is this she?" she said, pointing to me. "It is," said St. John. "Oh, do you think you shall be like Morton?" she asked of me, and with a direct and naive simplicity of tone and manner, and it was pleasing as if childlike. "I hope I shall, and I have many inducements to do so." "Oh, and did you find your scholars as attentive as you expected?" "Yes, quite." "Do you like your house?" "Very much so." "Have I furnished it nicely?" "Oh, very nicely indeed." "And made a good choice of an attendant for you and Alice Wood?" "You have indeed, and she is teachable and handy." "Well, I shall come up to help you teach sometimes," she added, "and it will be a change for me to visit you now and then, and I'd like a change. And Mr. Rivers, if I have been so gay during my stay at S, well, last night, or rather this morning, I was dancing till 2 o'clock, and the regiment that was stationed there, since the riots, and the officers are the most agreeable men in the world, and they put all our young knife grinders and our scissor merchants, well, to shame." It seemed to me that Mr. St. John's underlip protruded, and his upper lip curled in a moment. His mouth certainly looked a good deal compressed, and the lower part of his face unusually stern and square, and as the laughing girl gave him this information, he lifted his gaze too from the daisies and turned it on her. An unsmiling and a searching, a meaning gaze as it was. She answered it with a second laugh, and laughter well became her youth, her roses, her dimples, and her bright eyes. As he stood mute and grave, she again fell to caressing Carlo. "Oh, poor Carlo loves me," she said. "Oh, he is not stern and so distant to his friends, and if only he could speak, he would not be so silent." And as she patted the dog's head, and bending with native grace before his young and austere master, I saw a glow rise to that master's face. I saw his solemn eye melt with sudden fire, and a flicker with resistless emotion. Flushed and kindled as thus, he looked nearly as beautiful for a man as she for a woman. His chest heaved once, as if his large heart, weary of despotic constriction, had expanded, despite the will, and made a vigorous bound for the attainment of liberty. But he curbed it, and I think it was a resolute rider that would curb a rearing steed. He responded neither by word nor movement to the gentle advances made towards him. "Oh, Papa says you never come to see us now," continued Miss Oliver, looking up. "You are quite a stranger at Vale Hall, and he is alone this evening, and not very well. Please, will you return with me to visit him?"
"It is not a seasonable hour to intrude on Mr. Oliver," answered St. John.
"Not a seasonable hour, but, well, I declare that it is, and it is the hour when Papa most wants company, and, well, the works are closed, and he has no business to occupy him. Oh, now, Mr. Rivers, do come, please. Oh, why are you so overly shy and, oh, so very somber?"
She filled up the hiatus in his silence and left by a reply of her own.
"Oh, I forgot," she had exclaimed, shaking her beautiful curled head as if she shocked at herself. "I'm so giddy and thoughtless. Oh, please, do excuse me. It had slipped my memory that you have a good reason to be indisposed for joining in my chatter. Well, Diana and Mary have left you and more house to shut up, and you are so lonely, and I am sure that I pity you. But please, do come see Papa."
"Not tonight, Miss Rosamond. Not tonight." Mr. St. John spoke almost like an automaton. Himself only he knew the effort that it cost him thus to refuse.
"Well, if you are so obstinate, then I will leave you, for I dare not stay any longer. And the dew does begin to fall. Good evening."
She held out her hand, and he touched it. "Good evening," he repeated in a voice low and hollow as an echo. She turned, but in a moment returned.
"Are you well?"
she asked. Well, might she put the question? His face was blanched as her gown. "Quite well," he enunciated, and with a bow he left the gate. She went one way, and he another. She turned twice to gaze after him as she tripped fairy-like down the field. He, as he strode firmly across, never turned at all. This spectacle of another's suffering and sacrifice wrapped my thoughts from exclusive meditation on my own. Diana Rivers had never designated her brother inexorable as death. She had not exaggerated. Chapter 32. I continued the labors of the village school as actively and faithfully as I could. It was truly hard work at first, and some time elapsed before, with all my efforts, and I could comprehend my scholars and their nature. Wholly untaught and with faculties quite torpid, they seemed to me hopelessly dull, and at first sight all dull alike, but I soon found that I was mistaken. There's a difference among them as amongst the educated, and when I got to know them and they knew me, this difference rapidly developed itself. Their amazement at me, my language and my rules and ways, it had once subsided. I found that some of these heavy-looking and gaping rustics were to wake up into sharp-witted girls, and many showed themselves obliging and amenable too. And I discovered amongst them not a few examples of natural politeness and innate self-respect, as well as of excellent capacity that won both my goodwill and admiration. These soon took a pleasure in their doing and in their work well, in keeping their persons neat, in learning their tasks regularly, and in acquiring a quiet and orderly manners. The rapidity of their progress in some instances was even surprising, and an honest and happy pride I took in that. And besides, I began personally to like some of the best girls, and they liked me. I had amongst my scholars several farmers' daughters, young women grown, almost, and these could already read, write, and sew, and to them I taught the elements of grammar, geography, history, and the finer kinds of needlework. I found estimable their characters amongst them, and characters desirous of information and disposed from improvement, with whom I passed many a pleasant evening and an hour in their homes. The parents then, which would be the farmer and his wife, they loaded me with attentions. There was an enjoyment in accepting their simple kindness and repaying it by consideration, a scrupulous regard to their feelings, to which they were not, perhaps, at all times accustomed, and which both charmed and benefited them. because while it elevated them to their own eyes, it made them seem emulous to the merit and the deferential treatment that they received. I felt that I had become a favorite in the neighborhood. Whenever I went out, I heard on all sides nothing but cordial salutations, and was welcomed with friendly smiles. To live amidst general regard, and though it be the regard of working people, is like sitting in the sunshine, and it's calm and it's sweet. Oh, serene inward feelings that bud and bloom under such a ray. This period of my life, my heart was far oftener swelled with thankfulness, and then sank with dejection. And yet, reader, to tell you all, and in the midst of this calm, this useful existence, after a day passed in honorable exertion, amongst my scholars, an evening spent in drawing or reading, contentedly alone, I used to rush into strange dreams at night, dreams that many-colored and agitated, full of the ideal, the stirring, the stormy, and the dreams as they were amidst unusual scenes, and charged with adventure, with agitating risk, and romantic chance. I still, yet again and again, meet Mr. Rochester, and always at some exciting crisis. And then the sense of being in his arms, and hearing his voice, and meeting his eye, and touching his hand and his cheek, and loving him, and being loved by him, and the hope of passing a lifetime at his side, that would be renewed, and with all the first force and fire. And then I awake, and then I recall where I am, and how I am situated. And at that moment I rose up, and on my curtainless bed I am trembling and quivering. And then the still, dark night witnessed the convulsion of despair, and heard the burst of passion. By 9 o'clock the next morning, I was punctually opening the school, tranquil and settled, prepared for the steady duties of the day. Rosamond Oliver kept her word in coming to visit me. Her call at the school was generally made in the course of her morning ride. She would canter up to the door on her pony, and followed by a mounted livery servant. Anything was more exquisite than her appearance, and in her purple habit, with her Amazon's cap of black velvet placed gracefully above the long curls that kissed her cheek and floated to her shoulders, can scarcely be imagined. It was thus that she would enter the rustic building and glide through the dazzled ranks of the village children. She generally came at the hour when Mr. Rivers was engaged in giving his daily catechising lesson. Keenly, I fear, I did the eye of the visitress pierce the young pastor's heart. A sort of instinct seemed to warn him of her entrance, even when he did not know and did not see it. And when he was looking quite away from the door, if she appeared at all, his cheek would glow, and his marble-seeming features, though they refused to relax, changed indescribably, and in their quiescence became expressive, and that of a repressed fervor stronger than a working muscle or a darting glance could indicate. Of course she knew her power, and indeed he did not, because he could not conceal it from her. In spite of his Christian stoicism, when she went up and addressed him and smiled gaily and encouragingly, and even fondly in his face, his hand would tremble and his eye would burn. He seemed to say with his sad and resolute look that, if he did not say it with his lips, it definitely said, "I love you, and I know that you prefer me. It is not despair of success that keeps me dumb, and if I offered my heart, I believe that you would accept it, but that heart is already laid on a sacred altar. The fire is arranged around it. It will soon no be more than a sacrifice consumed." And then she would pout like a disappointed child at that, and a pensive cloud would soften her radiant vivacity, and she would withdraw her hand hastily from his, and turn into a transient petulance from his aspect, at once so heroic and so martyr-like. St. John, no doubt, would have given the world to to recall and retain her when she thus left him, but he would not give one chance of heaven, nor relinquish, for the Elysium of her love, and as the one true hope, the eternal paradise. Besides, he could not bind all that he had in his nature, the rover, the aspirant, the poet, the priest, and in the limits of a single passion. He could not, and he would not, renounce his wild field of mission warfare for the parlors and the peace of Vale Hall. I learned so much from him in that inroad that I once, and despite his reserve, had the daring to make on his confidence. Miss Oliver had already honored me with the frequent visits to my cottage, and I had learnt her whole character, and which was without mystery or disguise. She was coquettish, but not heartless. She was exacting, but not worthlessly selfish. She had been indulged from her birth, but was not absolutely spoiled. She was hasty, but good-humored, but with not affected, but liberal hand, she was innocent of the pride of wealth, ingenious and sufficiently intelligent. She was gay, lively, and unthinking, and she was very charming, in short, even to a cool observer of her own sex like me. But she was not profoundly interesting or thoroughly impressive. A very different sort of mind was hers from that, for instance, of the Sisters of St. John. Still, I liked her almost as much as I liked my pupil Adele, except that, for a child whom I have watched over and taught, a closer affection is engendered than we can give an equally attractive adult acquaintance. She had taken an amiable caprice to me, and she said that I was like Mr. Rivers, only certainly, she allowed, not 1/10 handsome as so, and though I was as nice as a neat little soul enough, but he was like an angel. I was, however, good, clever, composed, and firm like him. I was a lusus nature, as she affirmed, and as a village schoolmistress she was sure my previous history, if known, would make a delightful romance. And one evening, while with her usual childlike activity and thoughtlessness, yet not offensive inquisitiveness, she was rummaging the cupboard and the table drawer of my little kitchen, and she discovered the first 2 French books, a volume of Schiller and a German grammar and dictionary, and then my drawing material and some sketches, including a pencil head of a pretty little cherub-like girl, one of my scholars, and sundry views from the nature that had been taken in from the Vale of Morton and on the surrounding moors. She was first transfixed with surprise, and then electrified with delight. "Oh my, have you done these pictures? Oh, do you know French and German? Oh, what a love, what a miracle you are! Oh, you draw better than my master in my first school, and oh, would you sketch a portrait of me? Oh, so that way I could show Papa your skills?" "Of course, with pleasure," I replied, and I felt a thrill of an artist's delight at the idea of copying from so perfect and radiant a model. She had then on a dark blue silk dress, and her arms and neck were bare. Her only ornament was her chestnut tresses, which waved over her shoulders and with all the wild grace of natural curls. I took a sheet of fine cardboard and drew a careful outline. I promised myself the pleasure of coloring it, and as it was getting very late then, I told her that she must come and sit another day. And at that she made a report of me to her father, and that Mr. Oliver himself accompanied her the next evening. He was a tall and massive-featured middle-aged man, and he had gray hair, at whose side that he sat was his lovely daughter, and she looked like a bright flower near a hoary turret. He appeared a taciturn and perhaps a proud personage, but he was very kind to me, and the sketch of Rosamond's portrait pleased him highly, and he said that I must make a finished picture of it, and he insisted, too, on my coming the next day to spend the evening at Vale Hall. And so I went, and I found it large and a handsome residence, and showing abundant evidences of wealth in the proprietor. Rosamond was full of glee and pleasure all the time that I stayed. Her father was affable, and when he entered into conversation with me after tea, he expressed in strong terms of his approbation of what I had done at Morton School, and he said that he only feared from what he saw and heard that I was too good for the place and would soon quit for something more suitable. "Oh, indeed," cried Rosamond. "Oh, she is clever enough to be a governess in a high family, papa." I thought that I would far rather be where I am than in my high family in the land. Mr. Oliver spoke of Mr. Rivers, of the Rivers family, and with great respect. He said it was a very old name in the neighborhood, and that the ancestors of the house were wealthy, and that all Morton had belonged to them. That even now he considered the representative of that house might, if he liked, make an alliance with the best. He accounted it a pity that so fine and a talented young man would have formed the design of going out as a missionary. It was quite throwing a valuable life away, he thought. It appeared then that her father would throw no obstacle in the way of Rosamond's union with St. John. Mr. Oliver evidently regarded the young clergyman of good birth, old name, and sacred profession as sufficient compensation for the want of fortune. It was the 5th of November, and it was a holiday. My little servant, after helping me to clean my house, was gone, and well satisfied with the fee of a penny for her aid. All about me was spotless and bright, the scoured floor, the polished grate, and the well-rubbed chairs. I had also made myself neat, and had now afternoon tea before me to spend as I would. The translation of a few pages of German occupied an hour, and then I got my palette and pencils and fell to more soothing, because easier occupation of complimenting Rosamond Oliver's miniature. The head was finished already, and there was but the background to tint and the drapery to shade off. A touch of carmine, too, to add to the ripe lips, a soft curl here and there to the tresses, a deeper tinge to the shadow of the lash under the azured eyelid. I was absorbed in the execution of these nice details, when after one rapid tap my door unclosed, and admitted St. John Rivers. "I am come to see how you are spending your holiday," he said. "Not in hope and in thought, no, that is well, but while I draw you, it will not feel lonely. You see that I mistrust you still, and thought that you have borne up wonderfully so far, and I have brought you a book for the evening solace." And he laid on the table a new publication. It was a poem, one of those genuine productions so often vouchsafed to the fortunate public of those days, the golden age of modern literature. Alas, the readers of our era are less favored. But courage. I will not pause either to accuse or repine. I know poetry is not dead, nor genius lost, nor has Mammon gained power over either, to bind or slay. They will both assert their existence and their presence, their liberty and strength again one day. O powerful angels, safe in heaven! They smile when sordid souls triumph and feeble ones weep over the destruction. Poetry destroyed, genius banished? Oh, no. Mediocrity? No. Do not envy prompt you to the thought. No, they do not only live, but reign and redeem, and without their divine influence spread everywhere, you would be in hell, the hell of your own meanness. And while I was eagerly glancing at the bright pages of Marimon, as it was, St. John stooped to examine my drawing. His tall figure sprang erect again with a start, and he said nothing. I looked up at him, and he shunned my eye. I knew his thoughts well, and could read his heart plainly, and at the moment I felt calmer and cooler than he had, and I was then temporarily the advantage of him, and I conceived an inclination to do him some good if I could. With all of his firmness and self-control, I thought to myself, he tasks himself too far and locks every feeling and pang even within expresses confidences and imparts nothing. I'm sure it would benefit him to talk a little bit about his sweet Rosamond, whom he thinks he ought not to marry. Ooh, I will make him talk. And then I said first, "Please take a chair, Mr. Rivers." But he answered, as he always did, that he could not stay. "Very well," I responded. "Please stand if you like, but you shall not go just yet. I am determined, and solitude is at least as bad for you as it is for me. I'll try if I cannot discover the secret spring of your confidence, and find an aperture in that marble breast, and through which I can shed at least one drop of balm of sympathy." "Is this portrait like?" he asked bluntly. Like whom? I did not observe it closely." "Oh, you did." He almost started at my sudden and strange abruptness. He looked at me astonished. "Oh, please, that is nothing," I muttered with... "I don't mean to be baffled by a little stiffness on your part, but I'm prepared to go to considerable lengths," I conjectured. "You observed it closely and distinctly, I see, but I have placed no objection to your looking at it again, and so then I rose and I placed it in his hand. "Well, it is a well-executed picture," he said. "It is a very soft and clear coloring, and very graceful, and it is a correct drawing." Yes, I know all that, but what of the resemblance? Who is it like?" And mastering some hesitation, he answered, "Well, it is Miss Oliver, I presume." "Of course, and now sit, sir. To reward you for your accurate guess, I will promise to paint you a careful and faithful duplicate of this very picture, provided that you will admit that the gift would be acceptable to you. I don't wish to throw away my time and trouble on offering you something that you would deem worthless." He continued to gaze at the picture, and the longer he looked, the firmer he held it, and the more he seemed to covet it. "Oh, it is like," he murmured. "The eye is well managed, the color, the light, the expression. Oh, it is perfect. And look, it smiles so." "Would it comfort or would it wound you to have a similar painting? Please tell me that. When you are at Madagascar, or at the Cape, or in India, would it be a consolation to have that memento in your possession, or would the sight of it bring recollections calculated to enervate and distress?" Now he fervently raised his eyes and glanced at me, irresolute and disturbed. He again surveyed the picture. "That I should like to have it is certain, and whether it be judicious or wise is another question." And since I had ascertained that Rosamond preferred him, and that her father was not likely to oppose the match, I, less exalted in my views than John, had been strongly disposed in my own heart to advocate their union. It seemed to me that should he become the possessor of Mr. Oliver's large fortune, he might do as much good with it as if he went and laid his genius out to wither, and his strength to waste under a tropical sun. And it was with this persuasion that I now answered. "As far as I can see, it would be wiser and more judicious if you were to take yourself the original at once." By this time he sat down, and he laid the picture on the table before him, and with his brow supported on both hands, he hung fondly over it, and I discerned that he was now neither angry nor shocked at my audacity. I saw even that to be thus frankly addressed on such a subject he had deemed unapproachable, and to hear it thus freely handled, was beginning to be felt by him as a new pleasure, an unhoped-for relief. Reserved people often really need the frank discussion of their sentiments and griefs more than the expansive. The sternest seeming stoic is a human after all, and to burst with boldness and goodwill into the silent sea of their souls is often to confer on them the first of obligations. "You know, she does like you, I am very sure," I said as I stood behind his chair. "And, you know, her father does respect you, and moreover she is a sweet girl, and rather thoughtless, but You have sufficient thought for both yourself and her. You know, you ought to marry her."
"But does she like me?" he answered.
"Certainly better than she likes anyone else. Oh, she talks of you continually, and there is no subject that she enjoys so much or touches upon so often."
"It is very pleasant to hear this," he said. "Very much so. Please go on for another quarter of an hour." And he actually took out his watch and laid it upon the table to measure the time.
"But where is the use of going on?" I asked, "when you are probably preparing some iron blow of contradiction or forging a fresh chain to fetter your heart?"
"Oh, don't imagine such hard things. Fancy me yielding and melting, and as I am doing so now, human love rising like a freshly opened fountain in my mind, and overflowing with sweet inundation in all the field that I have so carefully and with such labor prepared, so assiduously sown with the seeds of good intentions, of self-denying plans, and now it is deluged with a nectarous flood, the young germs swamped in the delicious poison cankering them. Now I see myself stretched on an ottoman in a drawing-room at Vale Hall, at my bride Rosamond Oliver's feet, and she is talking to me with her sweet voice and gazing down on me with those eyes, oh, your skillful hand has copied it so well, and smiling at me with those coral lips. Oh, she is mine, and I am hers, and this present life and the passing world suffice to me. Oh, hush, say nothing, my heart is full of delight, and my senses are entranced. Let the time I marked pass in peace."
I humored him at this, and the watch ticked on, and he breathed fast and low, and I stood silent. Amidst this harsh and hushed quartet speed, he replaced the watch and laid the picture down, and he rose and stood on the hearth.
"Now," he said, "that little space was given to delirium and delusion. I rested my temples on the breast of temptation, and put my neck voluntarily under her yoke of flowers. I tasted her cup. The pillow was burning, and there was an asp in the garland, and the wine was a bitter taste, and her promises are hollow, and her offers are false. I see and know all of this."
I gazed at him in wonder.
"It is strange," perused he, "that while I love Rosamond Oliver so wildly with all the intensity, and indeed of a first passion, the object of which is exquisitely beautiful and graceful and fascinating, I experience at the same time a calm, an unwarped consciousness that she should not and would not make a good wife, that she is not the partner suited to me, and that I should discover this within a year after marriage, and that to 12 months' rapture would succeed a lifetime of regret. This I know."
"How strange indeed!" I could not help ejaculating this.
"And while something in me," he went on, "is acutely sensible to her charms, and something else is deeply impressed within her defects, they are such that she could sympathize in nothing that I aspire to cooperate in nothing that I undertook. Rosamond is a sufferer, a laborer, a female apostle, and Rosamond is a missionary's wife? Oh, no."
"But you need not be a missionary. You might relinquish that scheme."
"Relinquish? What? My vocation, my great work, my foundation laid on earth for a mansion in heaven? My hopes of being numbered in the band who have merged in all ambitions the glorious one of the bettering of their race, of carrying a knowledge into the realms of ignorance, of substituting peace for war, freedom for bondage, religion for superstition? Oh, the hope of heaven and for the fear of hell. Must I relinquish that? It is a dearer and more than blood in my veins. It is what I have to look forward to and to live for."
After a considerable pause, I said, "And Miss Oliver, are her disappointment and sorrow of no interest to you?" Miss Oliver is ever surrounded by suitors and flatterers, and in less than a month my image will be effaced from her heart, and she will forget me and will marry probably someone who will make her far happier than I should ever. You speak coolly enough, but you suffer in conflict. You are wasting away. No, if I get a little thin, it is with anxiety about my prospects, yet unsettled my departure and continually procrastinated. Only this morning I received intelligence that the successor whose arrival that I have been so long expecting cannot be ready to replace me for 3 months to come yet, and perhaps the 3 months may extend to 6. Look, you tremble and become flushed whenever Miss Oliver enters the schoolroom. Again the surprised expression crosses his face, and he had not imagined that a woman would dare speak so to a man, and for me I felt at home in this sort of discourse. I could never rest in communication with strong, discreet, and refined minds, whether male or female, until I had passed the outworks of conventional reserve and crossed the threshold of confidence, and won a place by their heart's very hearthstone. You are an original, he said, and not timid. There is something brave in your spirit as well as penetrating in your eye. But allow me to assure you that you partially misinterpret my emotions. You think them more profound and potent than they are. You give me a larger allowance of sympathy than I have to just claim to. And when I color and when my shade and before Miss Oliver, I do not pity myself. I scorn the weakness. I know it is ignoble and a mere fever of the flesh, and not that I declare the convulsion of the soul, that is just as fixed as a rock and firm set in the depths of a restless sea. Know me to be what I am, a cold, hard man. I smiled incredulously. You have taken my confidence by storm, he continued, and now it is with much at your service that I am simply in my original state and stripped of what that blood-bleached robe with which Christianity covers human deformity, a cold, hard, ambitious man. Natural affection only of the sentiments has permanent power over me. Reason and not feeling is my guide. My ambition is unlimited. My desire to rise higher and to do more than others is insatiable. I honor endurance and perseverance, industry, talent, because there are means by which men achieve great ends and mount to lofty eminence. And I watch your career with interest because I consider you a specimen of diligent, orderly, and energetic woman. Not because I deeply compassionate with what you have gone through or what you still suffer. You would describe yourself as a mere pagan philosopher, I said. No, there is this difference between me and deistic philosophers. I believe in the gospel. You missed your epithet, and I am not pagan, but a Christian philosopher, a follower of the sect of Jesus. As his discipline and disciple, I adopt his pure and his merciful, his benignant and doctrines of such. I advocate them. I am sworn to spread them, and won in youth to religion. She has cultivated my original qualities thus, and from the minute germ and the natural affection, she has developed the overshadowing tree, the philanthropy, and from the wild, stringy root of human uprightness she has reared a due sense of divine justice, of the ambition to win power and renown for my wretched self, and that she has formed the ambition to spread my Master's kingdom, to achieve victories for the standard of the cross. So much has religion done for me in turning the original materials to the best account, and pruning and training nature. Oh, but she could not irradiate nature, and nor will it be eradicated, till this mortal shall put on immortality. Having said this, he took his hat, which lay on the table beside my pallet, and once more he looked at the portrait. She is lovely, he murmured. She is well named the rose of the world indeed. And may I not paint one like it for you? Che bono. No. He drew over the picture and the sheet of thin paper on which I was accustomed to rest my hand in painting, to prevent the cardboard from being sullied. What he suddenly saw on this blank paper it was impossible for me to tell, but something had caught his eye. He took it up with a snatch, and he looked at the edge, and then shot a glance at me. It was inexpressible, peculiar, and it was quite incomprehensible, a glance that seemed to take and make note of every point in my shape, my face, and my dress, for it traversed all, quick, keen, and as quick as lightning. His lips parted, and as if to speak, but he checked the coming sentence, whatever it was. "What is the matter?" I asked. "Nothing in the world," was the reply, and replacing the paper, I saw him dexterously tear a narrow slip from the margin. It disappeared in his glove, and with one hasty nod and a "good afternoon," he vanished. "Well," I exclaimed to myself, and using an expression of district, "that caps the globe, however." I, in my turn, scrutinized the paper, but saw nothing on it, save a few dingy stains of paint where I had tried to tint my pencil. I pondered the mystery a minute or two, but finding it insolvable, and being certain that it would be not of much good for the moment, and so I dismissed it and soon forgot it. Whew. I'll see if I'll read this next chapter, but I know I've hit my 2-hour mark and I'm starting to get a little tired. I don't know, guys. You think I should do another chapter? Nah, I think I'm going to save it for tomorrow. I am feeling a little tired, but we are getting closer and closer. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me and being part of my Goodnight reading series and supporting me and just being here in general. It does mean a lot to me at the end of the day. It is nice to be able to share this book with you guys. And as always, if you like listening and hanging out with me and, just being here and having something to maybe fall asleep to, please feel free to like, subscribe, or follow. I do stream pretty regularly, and I am more so getting back into the swing of things since I'm getting over being sick. So I do appreciate you guys there for, accepting me and kind of giving me a little bit of grace on that. And yeah, so I will be streaming again tomorrow. You can come and see me at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I will be doing another 2-hour read. And yeah, with that, I hope you guys enjoyed your time, and I hope you all stay safe and stay geeky. And yeah, bye for now, my friends.